call to order the July 12th meeting of the Portsmouth Community Network Broadband Authority. And Madam Secretary, if you would call the roll.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Barnes?
Here.
Mr. Battle? Not here. Mr. Glover? Not present. Mr. Moody? Not present. Dr. Whitaker?
Present.
Mr. Woodard?
Here.
Ms. Lucasberg?
Here. Thank you. And we have a need to adopt our minutes of our last meeting. They should be in your packet. If you haven't had an opportunity to look at those, if you could take a look now. If there are any changes to be noted, we'll hear those. If there are none to be noted, I entertain a motion to approve the minutes as printed.
Move for approval. Second.
Thank you. It has been moved and properly second that we approve our minutes. Madam Secretary, if you will call the roll.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Battle? Not here. Mr. Glover? Not here. Mr. Moody? Not here. Dr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mr. Woodard?
Yes.
Ms. Lucasberg?
Yes. Okay, we have taken care of the initial part of our agenda. Now we have a public hearing on our rate schedules. We have talked about our rate schedules. They have gone out in email. A couple individuals and businesses in the community have had an opportunity to review those. And we do have one speaker today. Is there a speaker for them?
I think he might be speaking as a non-agenda speaker.
Okay, non-agenda speaker. Okay, all right. I know we were scheduled for another speaker, but they had a conflict. I think they told you that they wouldn't be able to be here. So the floor is open for anyone desiring to speak to our rate schedule. And seeing that we have no speakers, we can move into the next part of our agenda, which is the discussion of the strategic Wi-Fi deployment. And we have Attorney Sweringer or Mr. Jones.
Daniel's going to be bringing up the map again that we looked at last time.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is really just a continuation from our discussion last month because we ran out of time.
Right.
But it sounded like the board was looking to pursue, it keeps, there's no map up there yet.
Yeah.
Is going to pursue this Wi-Fi deployment, at least looking at the cost-benefit analysis of it.
Right.
So with your consensus, we can move forward and start contacting those property owners.
Mm-hmm.
And staff's recommendation would be, once we find out from the property owners if they are amenable to this plan, because we need to get their consent to build out onto their property and to occupy their property.
Mm-hmm.
Then as those come in, we can take those properties that have consented and come back with quotes to tell you exactly how much it costs at each of those properties.
Right.
And once we have those quotes, we can figure out how to prioritize where to build first.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I did want to bring up that the build-out itself, staff would recommend that the city do the build-out, not the authority.
Right.
And the reason behind that would be that then the city owns all of the infrastructure, and that infrastructure can just be part of the lease that goes between the city and this body. If this body instead was the one that would do the build-out, it would take a lot more time, first of
Right.
all. And also, we'd have to come up with some sort of arrangement to share this resource. So it's still relevant for this authority to look at the cost-benefit analysis, because ultimately it will be up to you as to whether you want to maintain that equipment and whether you want to use that equipment to provide wireless services. But I just wanted to clarify that we're not recommending that this body be the one to actually do the procurement and build out.
Okay, Dr. Whitaker.
When you're speaking of build out, what type of equipment commitment is needed per site?
It's site dependent, but essentially wherever our fiber line comes in on the right of way, because most of the time it's located in the right of way, it would be a build out, it's called a lateral, so something sticking out from that main line that goes into the property itself. And then you need some sort of equipment that allows you to transmit the fiber, or not the fiber, to transmit the signal to Wi-Fi. There's some other equipment that's involved in there too, but that's the kind of bare bones basic bits of it.
At our next meeting, or even before, can you send us, I assume this is already in place at certain places, this build-out, can you send us so we see exactly what it is you're speaking of? I was curious because when you say we have to get permission from private landowners, so the city easement rights, those don't come into play there?
The type of technology we're talking about, you can't, if you placed it on locations where we already have easements, it wouldn't reach all the potential consumers. At least, I can't think of any equipment that you'd have that would be able to reach it. We need to strategically locate it within the property to really get the signal that would be useful. Is that accurate?
Right, correct, because we would have a mixture of both underground and above ground technology. So the right-of-way, the normal easements that the city has would take care of where our fiber lines are, but as we come out of that right-of-way, we would stay underground and then come up at strategic locations, power poles or high vertical assets that could then be used to mount that technology that propagates a signal.
Right. So when you talk about, again, getting the owner's permission, how is that obtained in other ventures that we do with other types of utilities?
Well, a lot of the utilities, we'd already have an agreement, or if they have a site plan because they're doing a new development, it would be part of that process. I cannot offhand think of what.
If the vertical asset would be outside of a Dominion power pole or anything that is a classified utility, if we were using part of their building or an asset that that property owner had, there's where that would come into play as to mounting the equipment directly to that. But we would still need an easement, please correct me if I'm wrong, to bury the cable to come up.
Right. Or some sort of permission. So when somebody like Cox or Verizon wants to come in and build out to the home, they need to get an easement or some sort of permission from a homeowner if they don't have it already in there. So it's that same process. And we can probably get a kind of schematic-ish thing for what PRHA looks like right now. Is that right?
Yeah. And that's what I was going to recommend. We can show you one of the deployments for PRHA, which would be very similar, minus, we would have to get these.
Do we have any idea of how many private owners that this permission is going to be needed?
I think that would be everybody that we've outlined that is non-PRHA. Now, I don't know offhand how many of them may be on multiple campuses or if they are single owners, but I think we can probably determine that from who actually owns or operates the campuses.
I know last time we spoke there was somewhere between 1 and 2 dozen.
Yes.
The number of parcels, but right, some of them could have a single owner.
Oh, okay.
Any other? So the little tick marks, the identifiers are the areas that we are contemplating for.
The colored squares.
So if you take down on towards Victory and Deep Creek, that's one of them. That's Independence Square. This is actually coming directly from our real estate system, so that's how it's listed as the owner.
Right. So it looked like the majority of them are going to be either apartment complexes, and they'll take care of multiple units inside of.
Correct.
So if I heard you correctly, you're saying about 24 private owners that would need to be contacted?
It was somewhere between a dozen and 2 dozen.
A dozen and 2 dozen, okay.
I'm pretty sure that's correct.
Yeah. And of course, that would be dependent upon if, one person owns 3 or 4. If they just own one,
Okay.
then that's going to affect the number of how many property owners.
Okay.
Because the one property owner could say, yes, I want it for all my properties, or.
Right. Okay.
Chrissy?
when I look at this map right here and I see some of the properties that's located in close proximity to each other, could it be one unit to take care of that whole radius, or will we have to station something on each property?
We'd have to station something on each property. The power, I guess, that the Wi-Fi and transmitters would put out wouldn't be strong enough to cover all those properties, but there might be some, let me see, for some of them. Oh, I don't know if you'd actually get that much savings from a build out. I don't think you could share any sort of linear.
No, because the FCC limits how much transmission power technologies can have. And by doing that, even though that is literally, you see it's across Victory
Right.
Boulevard,
Yeah,
that's still probably too far to have a reasonable coverage.
right.
So you probably still have to build out 3 different laterals
Right.
from there.
Mr. Barnes?
Well, I guess that was my question too, because I was going to say, like, say for instance, if you have it out there, homes, will Prentice Park be able to benefit from it as well, since it's directly across the street? But I guess that answers the question.
Yes.
And I think in an ideal scenario, we try to get these done at the same time, because
Right.
that, I'm sure, would provide, at the very least, some sort of efficiency with
Right.
closing down roads and all that. But,
Yes.
but as to actual savings, probably not that
Yeah.
much.
Because as they come through with underground, it's better to do everything that you have in the close proximity rather than them coming in and then having to pick back up and then come back in. So,
My question was, the reason I asked too is because, like, say if it was a neighborhood that's close to a neighborhood that we didn't intend to benefit from it, but they are going to get a benefit. That's what I was trying to say.
I see,
And
I
I would,
see.
and I'm okay with that. I just wanted to know.
Yeah, it's probably going to be a little too far away
Okay.
from that door.
so, but I think what you're also, like, if you take, like Hamilton Place,
Yes.
the neighbors that are behind it, yes, they're going to see the signal. Is it going to be as strong as if you live directly in it? Probably not. But it's still going to be open and available for them. So it's going to broadcast beyond the initial parcel. We're not containing it to that parcel. It'll broadcast as far as it possibly can.
Okay. Thank you.
And approximately, how many homes will be impacted by what we're doing? Do we know yet?
We don't have that right off the top.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and this all connects to our already existing,
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Any other questions, anyone? All right. If not, then we have a need for a closed session, and if someone could certify us to go into closed session. You don't have it?
Oh, no, we got it.
Okay, last thing. Yes, last thing. She said it's there. Okay.
I move to go into closed pursuant to Virginia Code subsection 2.2-3711A.33. Discussion by a local authority created in accordance with the Virginia Wireless Service Authority Act of confidential, proprietary information and trade secrets, and subsection 2.2-3711A.6. Discussion or consideration of the investment of public funds where competition or bargaining is involved, specifically regarding market rate pricing and pursuant to subsection 2.2-3711A.8 for the purpose of consultation with legal counsel retained by the authority regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice, specifically regarding fiber leases.
Is there a second?
Second.
Madam Secretary, we'll take the roll.
Ma'am. Mr. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Battle? Not here. Ms. Glover?
Yes.
Mr. Moody?
Yes.
Dr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mr. Woodard?
Yes.
Ms. Lucas Burke?
Yes. All right, we are in closed session, and if there's, we could have anyone who's not.
Such public business matters are as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened, were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting just concluded.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and properly second to certify close. Madam Secretary, call the roll.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Battle?
Yes.
Mr. Glover? Mr. Moody?
Yes.
Dr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mr. Woodard?
Yes.
Ms. Lucas Burke?
Yes. All right, we're back in our open session, and we have future business topics. Are there any topics that this authority would like to see on our upcoming meetings or agenda? We'll continue to rely on our attorney and our IT, Mr. Daniel Jones, to guide us through this process for our next steps. Our public hearing will remain open, so if there are citizens who continue to have a desire to speak to our rate schedule, they will have an opportunity to do this throughout the next month meeting. And our next meeting will be on August 9th at 4 o'clock. And we have the floor open now for our public speakers. We will allow 3 minutes. And we do have one signed up, and it is Mr. Pete Hatcher with AT&T. Mr. Hatcher, welcome. And if you'll step to the lectern. Sure. Yeah.
Good afternoon, council members. Thank you for the time today. As you said, I'm Pete Hatcher with AT&T, and for about 12 and a half years, I've been the state and local representative serving the Commonwealth, and currently get the pleasure of serving the city of Portsmouth. I heard that there was potential for some Wi-Fi projects, public Wi-Fi projects, potentially for underserved areas or otherwise, and this is something that AT&T is capable of doing and has done in some of the other territories with my peers. I'm not the technical person to tell you how all that comes together, but I do have a team of people that can come in and talk more about that when the time is appropriate. Most recently, I'd say the biggest project we did was in North Carolina, and it was for students, but we did a combination of 400 and some Wi-Fi access points between their schools and parks, actually. And that got stood up in about 2 months. So, we have a lot of capabilities for that, and just welcome the opportunity to talk to you when the time is right. So.
Are there any questions for Mr. Hatcher? Yes, Vice Chair?
Thank you, Chair. You said 400 points, so you guys have different stations throughout North Carolina that assist numerous of kids or communities.
Right. So they've got, I think it was 327 schools and then 90 parks that they outfitted with Wi-Fi. We're also working with Chesapeake right now on a potential project for their Great Bridge Museum in the dock areas there.
All right. Thank you, Chair.
I have a question. Oh, Mr. Battle?
So how does this work? Do you pay us?
There's
How do you get funds?
Right.
And how does the city get funds from such a marriage?
Good question. So there are some private-public partnership opportunities available, and that's another thing on the finance I'd have to bring in a team member to talk to. I know that there's grants, CARES, some of the other things that are available that I know. I don't know if North Carolina specifically used that exact act, but there were some funding opportunities, and we have people that can kind of help source those.
And I guess my question is, now AT&T is coming before us. Do we suspect that there are going to be other providers that are now going to be flooding this market or this opportunity to come and do the same thing?
I couldn't say for sure if they'll be coming or not. We get along with everybody, but I don't talk to them very often.
Okay.
So I'm not real sure.
Yes.
And Mr. Hatcher, you guys will be possibly using our infrastructure to launch this service that you guys want?
It could be a combination. I know that we have some equipment that is standalone. So, for example, if you wanted a apartment complex, then we'd bring in our own tower or mini tower to set up for that particular area. I think it would depend on the location that you're trying to put the Wi-Fi in.
Mr. Moody?
How did you enter into the relationships that you have with North Carolina or even Chesapeake? Was it through RFP or RFQ process from them?
I don't know if that came through an RFP, RFQ. I don't believe it did. Typically, you've got a peer like me that's serving the state government and would be aware of projects like that. A lot of times, these things are already on contract because it's a data rate plan for that and equipment to go with it. So it may not be necessary for an RFQ or RFP.
Okay, so either you contacted them or they contacted you?
Right. And I don't
Situation.
know. Right.
So it wasn't a formal relationship from that standpoint?
Right. You would have probably they contacted their account manager, would be my guess, or the account manager heard of it, that they were looking to do it and reached out. So for example, I can't say for North Carolina, that's a peer of mine, but Chesapeake, they just reached out to me and said, hey, we're looking to do some public Wi-Fi. Can you guys do this?
Okay.
So.
And I know that there are 5 other localities that are in the south side. So are you going to other localities as well to try to do similar connections?
We have conversations all the time. So for me, I do not have the city of Hampton in my portfolio or my module. So, but we have these conversations with Virginia Beach and Norfolk, and not ongoing active, but when these things come available, we try to pass along the information and let them know we can do it.
Mr. Bowden?
Does your company contract with city for fiber use?
Not for fiber use. No, AT&T is not the local exchange company, so we don't contract for fiber.
So would they be private companies? So companies like Cox, AT&T, and those companies wouldn't do that sort of thing, huh?
Well, we would work with the local exchange providers to do that if we needed to. Sometimes these are just LTE, 4G, 5G projects, and you don't need wires, so to speak. It just depends on where they're going.
It is. All right.
Anything else?
Well, thank you, Mr. Hatcher, for
Yeah.
coming before us. We're here every first Tuesday at 4 if you want to join us for any future meetings.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate it.
All right. Dr. Whitaker?
Yes, before we close, for our next meeting, can we have a discussion in closed session on the private-public ventures?
Yeah, so we do need to know about that. Okay. Any other, are there any other comments or concerns? Chair Woodard? And Vice Chair Woodard?
So when will so we not at the point of discussing anything with companies like AT&T? We're not at that point yet.
For what project?
Well, in association, well, we're still trying to get our free Wi-Fi together. So are we not at the point of including companies such as AT&T into what we have going on?
Oh, that would be an avenue that you could take to accomplish that task. We'll talk about that more on the next meeting, the different options you'd have.
What can we put that
Yeah,
on?
can we add that? Yes, we add that as future options.
Or why would he say they don't do it?
Go ahead.
What he was referring to when you asked him about fiber lease, that's underground. AT&T is a cellular, so they're over the top. They don't lease underground stuff, but they do provide service wirelessly.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Wireless services. So we want to look at other wireless services.
Right. You know, it's still the same goal.
Right.
You know.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Thanks, Dane, for the insight.
Okay. All right, members, if there are no other topics to bring before us, then this meeting is adjourned.